Greetings. My name is Egon Cholakian, and I am a scholar who has publicly appealed to the heads of world powers, Biden, Putin, and Xi Jinping. In my earlier message, I articulated the imminent threat that will annihilate our planet within a decade and cautioned that we have a window of 5 to 7 relatively calm years ahead of us to avert this planetary catastrophe. Yet my utterances were disregarded. As of this moment, we have only 4 to 6 years left to act. My scientific peers and I resolved to persist in our endeavors for the benefit of humankind without anticipating any assistance from the authorities. Recently, however, something changed and our mission is now in dire peril. Before I proceed, please allow me to present myself once again. I am a semi-retired professional with a national security background, the foundation of which was constructed on a solid international legal and particle physics education, which I received at preeminent international institutions. In my early career, I served as a legislative analyst attached to the President's Commission on International Trade and Investment Policy at the White House under Presidents Nixon and Ford. I was honored and privileged to work with both the Reagan Kitchen Cabinet and the Reagan White House, where I was intimately involved with Mr. Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative project. In total, I have worked directly with 4 U.S. presidents. In the event you are curious, I am currently a Capitol Hill lobbyist, and I am a member of the United States Geospatial Intelligence Foundation, the International Association of Intelligence Educators, and a proud founding member of the OSINT Foundation. Quite aside from my intimate involvement with the foregoing professional bodies, I still retain a visiting researcher relationship in the domain of national security at Harvard University as well. On the scientific front, if you elect to investigate me, you are likely to note that my name is duly cited in all 4 volumes of the CERN Laboratory's Future Circular Collider Conceptual Design Report, which sets forth the perimeters of collider physics. In concert therewith, I am likewise participating in NASA's NISAR mission. Additionally, throughout my career, my scientific research has routinely interfaced with the analysis of climate and geodynamic changes of the Earth and the implications for our civilization. I am going to disclose something that is concealed from the public view. It pertains to the imminent future of Russia and consequently the entire world. Hence, I, Egon Cholakian, urge everyone who listens to me ensure that my message today reaches Mr. Putin and his associates without delay. Russian citizens, disseminate my words to every individual in your nation. This is a reality that you need to be aware of. Mr. Putin, I have already issued public appeals to presidents. I had little expectation from Mr. Biden. He is surrounded by too many voices to hear my voice. However, I was relying on your rationality, Mr. Putin, on the assumption that you are a sensible person and will hear me, but it did not occur. No one I appealed to heard me whatsoever. Therefore, I was not intending to make any further appeals. Nevertheless, after what I heard from you, Mr. Putin, at the forum on February 20th, 2024, I cannot keep quiet. At the forum, you stated that climate change is the most important urgent issue for you. You expressed that you are willing to collaborate with those who can address this problem. You declared that you were worried about the future of Russia. Eloquent words, but your deeds are contradictory. On the one hand, you manifest your readiness to cooperate with those who can mitigate climate change. However, on the other hand, you persecuted scientists who have been alleviating climate change in Russia and Eastern Europe for a decade, owing to the experimental equipment they devised. You have not only halted the work of my scientific colleagues, but also of the volunteers who have assisted scientists in the arduous task of countering climate change. You have destroyed our cohesive scientific community and the sole hope of all humankind. If by your words about cooperation you imply such actions, then it's rather frightening to be your ally, Mr. Putin. I know that as a former KGB agent, you don't believe in words. You trust facts. So let's converse with you in your language and in the language of tangible facts. We begin by acknowledging that Russia is among the countries that pose a threat to the whole world. I am not referring to the political factor, but rather the climatic one, the actual and impending peril that you have engendered. It is common knowledge that the landmass of Russia, over which you govern, experiences a warming rate that is nearly triple that of the rest of the planet. Nonetheless, you have likely neglected to consider this. Nor do you consider why, despite this reality, for the past decade, Russia has witnessed fewer and milder calamities than other regions. Scientists across the globe who are not affiliated with our group are baffled by this phenomenon because it contravenes the laws of physics. It is a manifest paradox, an anomaly. How is it that while temperatures are anomalously escalating in your state, the perilous source of excess heat is within your borders, yet the trend of frequency and intensity of calamities is augmenting in other states, not in Russia? What accounts for this? Moreover, with such anomalous temperature rises and their fluctuations, the wind velocity should have amplified, but in contravention of the laws of physics, the average wind speed, on the contrary, has decreased both in Russia and in Eastern European states. Some conjectured that your state's scientists were so astute that under your rigorous supervision, they devised something that could withstand the climate. But they were mistaken. So despite the presence of various risk factors, what explains the low occurrence of cataclysms in Russia? Some might attribute this to divine intervention and assume that Russia enjoyed a special protection from God for a decade. However, I can attest that the reduction in the frequency and severity of natural disasters in Russia was due to the efforts of our group of scientists and the experimental equipment that I mentioned earlier. These were designed to alleviate the impact of climate cataclysms and were installed in Russia, which was identified as the most vulnerable place in the world. I will present some scientific evidence that corroborates the effectiveness of this equipment shortly. But first, I want to explain why, after 10 years of successful operation, the scientists who are my friends and colleagues are no longer able to continue their work, and why the equipment was dismantled and removed from Russia. To comprehend the reasons, it is essential to note that the work of our group of scientists who devised the equipment was linked to the activities of an international organization whose volunteers assisted us in conducting research for over 2 decades. However, on August 8th, you in Russia prohibited and expelled this organization, having orchestrated terror and persecution on ordinary volunteers who aided us scientists in safeguarding your territory from cataclysms, thus conferring you immense economic benefit about which, regrettably, you did not even suspect, as I perceive now. Consequently, the scientific activity of our organization on your territory was terminated. Therefore, on August 10th, my colleagues as law-abiding citizens ceased the work of equipment in Russia. You see, Mr. Putin, I have never regarded you as my friend. We are on opposing sides of the barricades. I did, however, acknowledge you as a worthy adversary notwithstanding. This personal assessment was derived from our earlier years with Mr. Yeltsin, once I served as a Comic-Con financing specialist with the Russian Ministry of Finance, and we met. Mr. Putin, what respect can there be after you expelled those who protected your country? As a consequence of these impetuous actions, your country and the countries of Eastern Europe, shielded by the protection of this equipment, were left without it, and now this will affect not only your territories, but the whole world. And after all of this, you now rise and say that you are concerned about the future of your country. Well, let's converse about your country, Mr. Putin. The equipment shutdown has already had a detrimental impact on Russia and has already inflicted compounded economic harm in the country. I will return to this issue a bit later, sir. Given the increasing trend that has started to manifest, natural disasters will become more common and more powerful, and you will witness it soon. These cataclysms will cause immense damage and agony to people. And the only one responsible for this in the eyes of people will be you, Mr. Putin. In my previous address to you, you did not heed me. So heed me now. Accept advice from a knowledgeable person. If I were in your position, I would not run for president. Heed my warning. Do not run for office, but vent for retirement instead, with at least some degree of dignity retained. If you bow out graciously now, people will ultimately blame those who succeed you for your negligence. Everyone, even those who are utterly loyal to you and ready to perish for you now, will curse you later. Leave now, or the citizens of not only your country, but the entire world will curse you by the end of your next term. Soon the world will discover who is responsible for what is already occurring and will only escalate in severity. I would therefore like to return to the core of my appeal and the facts that substantiate it. For 10 years, highly specialized novel equipment was functioning in Russia, which lowered the frequency and intensity of natural disasters, both for Russia and for some neighboring countries in Eastern Europe, which were within its area of influence. However, we were obliged to abruptly terminate its functioning because on August 8, 2023, the activity of the organization with which the developers of this equipment collaborated was declared undesirable in the Russian territory. On August 10th, we completely stopped its operation and the equipment itself was transported out of the country. Consequently, the mitigation effect provided by it has ceased. Yes, this device was operating unofficially, but it has conferred immense benefits to your country. To illustrate the enormity of the benefits it bestowed, I will present a brief comparative analysis. I fully comprehend that for you, Mr. Putin, as a politician and former KGB agent, words simply don't have any significance, but the facts do, since they are self-evident. Thus, let me proceed to concrete facts. Henceforth, I shall deliberately reference data from publicly accessible sources so that inhabitants of planet Earth may verify the veracity of my words. Let us compare the data on the frequency of natural disasters in Russia for 3 decades. According to the Ministry of Emergency Situations of Russia, for the decade from 1990 through 1999, there occurred 2,877 significant natural disasters that induced emergencies. For the decade from 2000 to 2009, there occurred 2,297 natural disasters. And from 2010 to 2021, that is for 11 years, the registered number of natural disasters emergency occurrences was only 939 total. This is more than twofold lower than each antecedent decade. Let me remind you that the equipment has been functioning since 2013 and has gained strength since 2014. In this respect, observe that 447 events in 11 years, which is nearly half, occurred prior to 2013. From 2013 to 2021 inclusive, which is 8 years, there were merely 492 natural disasters. Contemplate this. Less than 500 cataclysms in 8 years, while in prior decades there were almost 3,000 in 10 years. The statistics released by the Ministry of Emergency Situations demonstrates that in 2022, there were merely 78 natural disasters in Russia, which is 2.5 times lower than the year prior. These indisputable facts, which evidence that on the territory of Russia, during the preceding 10 years, the frequency of natural disasters has sharply decreased. The fact of this decrease is also reflected in the graphs compiled by other monitoring services of the world. Mr. Putin, has no one from the scientific community in your country taken an interest in this fact? Has no one noticed this glaring inconsistency that the frequency of extreme natural phenomena is rising globally and in other countries, but decreasing in Russia? Furthermore, this decrease is not attributable to any cyclical atmospheric phenomenon or the southern oscillation. For example, we will take a graph which illustrates the trend of weather-related hazards in Russia as compiled by Bloomberg using data from the Hydrometeorological Center of Russia. I chose this graph as an illustrative example for a specific purpose. This graph was referenced in the Bloomberg article to demonstrate the purported intensity of natural disasters in Russia, which naturally elicited a smile from me, as I imagine it would likewise do for any other scientific-minded person. Because, in fact, this graph does not exhibit a consistent growth trend. Upon closer inspection, one can discern that the growth trend in this graph persisted until 2013 through 2014, and then the graph indicates stabilization at a constant level. The trend became horizontal. Growth ceased and started to display indications of decrease. Note that this has happened precisely since 2014, when our equipment commenced operating at full power. Consider the increasing trend of billion-dollar disasters in the U.S. That is what growth looks like. While the graph of cataclysms in Russia demonstrates stabilization after 2013, with a downward trend after 2014. In order to draw a meaningful contrast, we will use the MDAT database as our source of data. This database provides a comprehensive record of natural disasters across the globe from the year 1900 until the present day. MDAT records natural disasters that have at least one of the following criteria: 10 fatalities, 100 affected people, a declaration of state of emergency, or a call for international assistance. According to this international database, the number of climate disasters in the world is rapidly increasing. However, in Russia, the number of climate disasters has been decreasing since 2013. I ask you, how could this conspicuous anomaly escape one's notice, particularly in light of the established fact that the temperature on the Russian territory is quite literally increasing almost 3 times more rapidly than generally on the planet? The increase of the mean annual temperature for the Russian territory over a decade is nearly 70% greater than for the globe. It is important to comprehend that every tenth of a degree of warming drastically augments the likelihood of severe and devastating cataclysms. Such an extreme escalation in temperatures should have inevitably influenced the number and intensity of cataclysms in the region. I presume that educated individuals would amply comprehend that the sharp difference from temperature should inherently induce amplification in the quantity of precipitation growth, acceleration of winds, and other extreme climatic manifestations. This is a physical law. If the temperature in a certain location shows intensive changes, then the climatic changes on this territory should correspondingly be more pronounced. Was there not a single scientist within your circle who wondered just why, despite the intensity of temperature increase, the equivalent intensity in the growth of cataclysms had not been observed for a decade? Nevertheless, the Hydrometeorological Center of Russia asserts that in 2021 and 2022, a downward trend in the number of days with strong winds has been detected for most of Russia. Likewise, a general reduction in the average wind speed was identified. If we consider the graphs of precipitation, quantity, and extreme hydrometeorological phenomena on the Russian territory, we will discern that the same downward trend is evident on them. Since 2013, the number of these events has been diminishing. It is worth mentioning that the same trend is manifested both in the graphs constructed by the meteorological services, as well as in the graphs generated by independent researchers using open data and by international services specializing in statistics. In all of these graphs, you can perceive the same downward trend since approximately 2013. A mere comparison of the number of natural disasters in Russia and other countries over a decade reveals a clear pattern. Countries with comparable or even much smaller land territories have endured much more severe, numerous cataclysms than Russia. I hope that intelligent people now have the question arising: how could Russia, a country with such a vast territory, have such a low level of large-scale catastrophes? After all, the extensive territory of Russia encompasses several geographic zones and natural areas with diverse geological and climatic conditions, which only increases the chances of hazardous natural phenomena and processes. The majority of the nation's land area, over 60%, is covered by permafrost, which is currently undergoing rapid thawing from beneath. A fifth of the country lies within the Arctic zone, where the most extreme temperature fluctuations occur. Russia borders 12 seas across 3 ocean basins and hosts approximately 300 volcanoes, of which nearly 25% are actually active. These factors produce the most adverse circumstances that should invariably result in an ascending trend of cataclysms within Russia. By all physical laws, Russia should witness more frequent and intense cataclysms. Yet the magnitude and number of natural disasters in Russia have not risen for the past decade, and these are real, tangible facts. Mr. Putin, these are undoubtedly quite favorable conditions for the well-being of the nation, are they not? However, such conditions prevailed only until 2023, or more precisely until August 10th, 2023, when we had to deactivate the equipment that safeguarded your nation and some Eastern European nations that fell within the scope of our experimental equipment. The mistake you committed, or rather the officials you appointed committed, has already cost Russia a great deal. Be prepared that climate changes will disastrously drain your budget in the near future. And now you will understand just why. On September 3rd, 2023, one of the esteemed volunteers of our organization, whose activities were declared unwelcomed in your country, made a public statement. He stated that after the equipment was disabled on August 10th, the increase in the number and strength of climate catastrophes in Russia would follow a natural trajectory without mitigation. The situation will develop as it would have developed in the absence of the equipment's operation. In addition, it was stated that the escalation of the magnitude and the number of cataclysms would be most noticeable, measurable, and accessible after 3 months of the equipment's shutdown. And the most pronounced manifestations would be seen after 6 to 9 months. Mr. Putin, had the scientific researchers within your circle been truly diligent in observing cataclysms and discerning patterns, they would have inevitably noticed that since August 2023, the entire horizontal steady trend of stability has abruptly broken. The frequency and intensity of extreme cataclysms in Russia have dramatically skyrocketed. This became particularly evident in the fall of 2023, precisely 3 months later, just as our esteemed volunteer stated. Recall the November storm Patina, which caused enormous devastation on the Black Sea shore in both Russia and Eastern Europe? Indeed, such a storm with such wind velocity and rainfall had not been witnessed for over a century. What about the anomalous floods in the Primoryet region in August 2023? Meteorologists have asserted that this magnitude of precipitation and flooding has never been seen there before, not to mention the excessive number of storms, gales, and precipitation, including rain and snow, that descended on Russia in the autumn of 2023 and winter of 2023 through 2024, causing severe harm to infrastructure. The veracity of this trend was confirmed by the statement of the head of the Russian Hydrometeorological Center, who noted that the winter of 2023 through 2024 realized the heaviest snow levels in decades. Paradoxically, in a decade, Russians, residents of severe northern country, have lost the habit of living in such extreme cold with such a high snow density and harsh snowstorms. At this point, the world community, I rather suspect, might harbor some degree of envy, giving rise to the obvious question: what was the reason for examining the effect of the experimental equipment specifically on Russian territory? Simple answer: it is because the territory of Russia, and especially Siberia, owing to its geological composition and anomalous warming 3.7 times more rapidly than the rest of the globe, poses a tremendous threat to the whole world, including you and the Kremlin, Mr. Putin. Hence, the operation of this equipment was intentionally directed toward this geographic region. And as you already know, it constrained the threat for 10 years. The difference in the climatic situation in Russia prior to and subsequent to the equipment shutdown is evident. It was effectively diminishing the frequency of extreme natural events and alleviated their impacts for both Russia and some Eastern European nations. And of course, when discussing the advantages it conferred, I must not omit the economic aspect as promised. According to the Russian Ministry of Emergency Situations in 2022, economic losses from natural disasters for Russia totaled only 7.2 billion rubles. At the current exchange rate, this is approximately 80 million US dollars. In contrast, in America, the losses from natural disasters in 2022 amounted to $164 billion. Hence, Russia's economic losses for 2022 are 0.05% of the amount of U.S. losses. A similar trend prevailed for the entire preceding decade. Over a decade, Russia's economic losses from natural disasters are comparable to slightly above $2 billion if we use the present exchange rate, whereas in the U.S. for the identical decade, the harm totaled more than $1 trillion. Consider the difference between $2 billion and $1 trillion. Think about it. For the same decade, Russia suffered only 0.2% of the economic damage that it should have faced in the same way as the U.S. and other countries faced. Furthermore, Russia's territory is about 74% larger than that of the U.S., and it is situated in extremely adverse natural conditions. The temperature in Russia is also rising 2 to 3 times faster than the global average. In physical terms, the economic losses in Russia should have been 2 to 3 times greater than in the U.S., meaning not just 1 trillion, but at least 2 or even 3 trillion U.S. dollars. However, now due to equipment shutdown, Russia has begun to face and will continue to face substantial economic losses. comparable to and or surpassing those of the United States. This trend manifested conspicuously in the fall of 2023 when the singular event of Storm Patina inflicted a colossal economic detriment on the country, estimated conservatively at 42 billion rubles. That would be 462 million US dollars, a figure that exceeds by a factor of 6 the aggregate loss from all natural disasters in 2022. The magnitude of economic losses from climate disasters increased with each successive decade, as evidenced by a global analysis of the growth dynamics. For instance, on the graph, you can observe the catastrophic increase in losses from 2010 to 2019. However, if we try to display Russia's share of losses for this decade, it will be so negligible that it is indiscernible on the graphics scale. This is remarkable considering that this is a country that encompasses 1/6 of the terrestrial surface. I would like to note that Russia is certainly not a model to emulate in terms of open and honest monitoring of its natural disasters and assessing their economic losses. However, it should be noted that when independent experts conducted their calculations over the last 10 years, they were often based not on facts, but on assumptions. But despite their exaggeration of the number of cataclysms and material damage they caused in Russia, the loss projected by those experts was still tenfold less than in other countries with the same territory. Moreover, it did not correspond with the actual dynamics of the global escalation of cataclysms or the dynamics of anomalous temperature rises on Russian territory. Therefore, the decrease in the number of large-scale and loss-making natural disasters in Russia during the last 10 years is a genuine, irrefutable fact. However, now, Mr. Putin, such a scenario will not recur henceforth. To comprehend the minimal dynamics of how the trend of escalation of natural disasters and accordingly losses from them for Russia will evolve henceforward, let us revisit the graph of escalation of cataclysms worth billions of dollars in the United States. It clearly demonstrates that the growth trend is vigorously ascending and is no longer merely linear. It shows indications of an exponent because the frequency of cataclysms, each costing the U.S. over $1 billion, is escalating. Considering all aggravating factors, if it were not for our equipment, the escalation rate of the cataclysm growth tendency in Russia should have been at least as rapid as in the United States. And these are the lowermost estimates. For this scenario disregards the fact that the temperature in Russia is increasing almost 3 times more rapidly, as you already know, which implies that the shown dynamic can be amplified by 3 times. Consequently, the tendency of intensification of cataclysm in Russia should have been, and henceforth it will be, manifold stronger than in the United States. And now not merely you, but the entire world will witness it. Mr. Putin, the economic benefit that our organization, expelled by you from the territory of Russia, but which had established the experimental equipment, providing colossal economic gain for your country, will no longer exist. Therefore, considering the trend of the rapidly increasing number of catastrophes worldwide, we can assert with certainty that Russia is presently enduring and will continue to suffer grave economic damages in the subsequent years owing to the aggravation of the climatic and geodynamic conditions within your country. I am deeply concerned about the consequences of shutting down this equipment, not from the standpoint of Russia's economic or political future. My anxiety pertains to Siberia. It is precisely this territory that now possesses a threat to the entire world. In the absence of any compensatory factor, the situation there will escalate significantly. After all, this equipment not only affected atmospheric conditions, the hydrometeorological processes, but also indirectly contributed to reducing the dynamics of the development of geophysical risk in the territories it covered, including Siberia. However, now this mitigating effect has vanished. What does this mean from a scientific standpoint for the fate of Russia and the world? To answer this question, it is essential to consider the severity of the situation our planet is currently facing. Catastrophic climate changes on our Earth occur cyclically once every 12,000 years. And today we live precisely during such a cyclical period when external cosmic influence imparts additional energy to the core of our planet. This leads to intensified magmatic activity, natural disasters, activation of endogenous processes, accelerated melting of glaciers, and exponential growth in seismic and volcanic activity. I would like to remind you that a significant portion of Russia's territory lies within the Arctic Circle, including much of Siberia. It is precisely there that record-breaking warming is occurring right now, driven by endogenous processes, and the rate of this warming is accelerating rapidly. Heat is already building up beneath Siberia in the upper layers of the mantle, and the thin lithospheric crust is beginning to melt with magma. In various regions of the Arctic, scientists from different expeditions, independently of each other, are already observing an intensification of underground thermal fluids, an increase in heat flow, and the appearance of thermal anomalies, hotspots. They note the accelerated melting of perennially frozen ground on the ocean floor, the bottom melting of glaciers, the bottom melting of Siberian permafrost, and the formation and expansion of methane craters in the areas where heat flow is increasing. The number of earthquakes in Siberia has significantly increased and will continue to rise. Additionally, Chinese scientists have recorded that the electrical conductivity in the mantle beneath Siberia at depths of 400 to 900 kilometers is significantly greater than the average conductivity worldwide. All these facts point to a growing activation of the Siberian depths, which could lead to a tremendous and large-scale catastrophe. As humanity, we have very little time left when we can actually undertake anything and somehow secure our future. We have no more than 4 to 6 relatively calm years remaining. Why do we declare such a short time frame? Because the situation on the planet right now is much worse than ever before in its history. During previous cycles, some of the excess energy from the depths was expelled through the ocean, which helped sustain life on the planet. But now the entire volume of the world's ocean is permeated with nanoplastic, which reduces the thermal conductivity. Since 1950, all the plastic we produced on Earth has ultimately ended up in the ocean, where there is now between 75 to 200 million tons of it. The area of plastic islands on the ocean surface is equal to the territory of the United States and Australia, but this is only 1% of the plastic. Meanwhile, 99% of the plastic in the form of nanoplastic is practically in every molecule of ocean water throughout its entire depth, significantly disrupting the ocean's thermal conductivity. Evidence of the irreversibility of the ocean's demise is the final death of coral reefs, vast underwater organisms that existed for hundreds of thousands of years. Today, the ocean is warming at an unprecedented rate. Shocking scientific data on ocean temperatures in 2023 and 2024 have exceeded all existing predictive models except for ours. And there are no indications whatsoever that this process will reverse itself. Thus, due to anthropogenic influence, the ocean no longer performs its thermal conductivity function, and heat remains trapped in its depths, increasing magma activity across the entire planet. These devastating conditions create the prerequisites for a global planet-wide catastrophe, which the Earth has not yet witnessed, but of which we, modern humanity, are likely to become witnesses to. Mr. Putin, the information you have just received is conclusive evidence built on a foundation of tangible facts. Should you have difficulty comprehending such data, I would then encourage you to turn to the resources readily available to your good self from within the Russian Academy of Sciences for concise clarification. The urgency of altering policies and rhetoric on climate and geodynamic changes on Earth is paramount, as the threatening processes are accelerating at a swift pace. Compare the condition of the ocean a decade ago, 2 years ago, a year ago, and now, in 2024, and contemplate how much time remains for humankind. We squander debating the cause of climate change. Rather than disputing the matter, we ought to be collaborating and seek a resolution. In the end, the responsibility rests solely with humans. It is imperative for politicians, especially in the former Soviet nations, to alter their attitude towards people, particularly scientists and volunteers helping them, and renounce the most deleterious Soviet customs in this regard. It is unacceptable to penalize and persecute those who confer immense benefit not merely to their nations, but also to humankind in general. Moreover, it is essential to acknowledge that climate matters cannot be exploited for profit and political gains. Presently, the climate and geodynamic agenda must be paramount if we as humankind are to survive at least the ensuing decade, which is highly dubious given the exponential escalation of climate threats, which can engender unforeseeable and catastrophic consequences. The moment has arrived to cease making profits and building political careers on the climate issue, when the existence of all, I stress all, is at stake. Otherwise, we will veritably repeat the destiny of Mars, which was formerly alive but forfeited its atmosphere and water. Children born today might not be able to get to know what school is, for they will simply fail to reach that age owing to the intensification of climatic and geodynamic catastrophes in their country, in their city, and in the street. Our planet's safety margin has run out. The devastating circumstance that the scientists who possessed some advancements in the direction of solving this problem, my colleagues and friends, are constrained in their activities, are subjected to persecution, and the experimental equipment was forcibly shut down. All this manifold aggravates the situation in which we as humankind find ourselves, and it hastens the impending catastrophe. Mr. Putin, I presume that the facts that I have cited herewith will suffice to acquaint you with the gravity of the fatal mistake you have committed by oppressing in your country excellent scientists, my colleagues, who have devoted decades of their lives to research, thanks to which for 10 years your nation has benefited enormously, along with some nations of Eastern Europe, which also profited from our experimental equipment. We accomplished all that was within our power, all that was feasible, and note, we did it without support, without resources and funding, and still we were able to achieve excellent results. And instead of gratitude, you destroyed our scientific community, oppressed the volunteers who helped us. You facilitated the circumstance that your proxies swayed the politicians of your neighboring country, where our volunteers and participants, very best and most decent people, were indicted with criminal cases. These individuals were traumatized through your raids, intimidation, and humiliation. Why did they deserve such treatment? Was it because our efforts ensured your safety for a decade, significantly reducing the damage you suffered from climate disasters? In the beginning, your officials, Mr. Putin, did everything to deceive, discredit, and create adverse and false reputation for our organization. This includes your attempts at your instigation to create a negative image of us in the free democratic world, where your people also deliberately influence public opinion, artificially shaping a negative attitude towards our organization. For what? For what purpose? So that some of your appointed officials can be promoted, stand out with merits, and be awarded new distinctions. Is that the price of Russia's future? Is that the price of safety of millions of people who, instead of their former protection, will now face unprecedented natural disasters in their regions and cities? I can say what the price of Russia's future is. The price of Russia's future is a fake medal on the chest of a fake official whom specifically you appointed to this position, Mr. Putin. And the fake praise, you are worthy, from a chorus of fake people singing to a fake official during the presentation of his fake medal. That is the entire price of Russia and you as its leader, Mr. Putin. And therefore, I will allow myself to remind you of my advice. Do not run in the upcoming elections if you have retained your sanity and rational mind. You are called the great grand master of this world. But now you find yourself in a stalemate into which your officials have driven you, those you trusted and appointed to responsible positions. You are becoming a hostage to your own situation and your ill-considered actions. In any scenario, people will curse specifically you. Even if we manage to rescue our planet from an impending disaster, I must stress without financial backing and amid total oppression, individuals in your country will still suffer. They will face severe consequences of climate-related disasters, and they will curse the person accountable for all these calamities. In the event that our group of scientists and the volunteers who help us do not succeed, cannot find funds and support, and we cannot find a solution to stop the planetary catastrophe, the world is doomed. And in the final throes, not only every citizen of your country, but all the people of all this world, as long as they have breath, will curse you even after your death, despite the fact that you may not have directly caused the disaster, but those whom you entrusted with power did. I don't know whether it was with your knowledge or not. They were the people you appointed, and you bear full responsibility for their actions and what they have done. Believe me, people in the whole world will know who is truly responsible for the death of humankind. And when they are dying, their curses will be hurled precisely at you, Mr. Putin. Therefore, hear me out, Mr. Putin. Leave now, and people will still keep respect for you. Leave now, and people will forget just what you have done because they will soon have more pressing concerns. Leave now, and you will preserve the memory of yourself as a great grandmaster. This is your only chance to save face and dignity. I would strongly advise you to use this chance now. However, I understand perfectly well that you will not take this step. Personal power is far more valuable to you than the lives of billions of people.